Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Startup Boston podcast, where I interview founders, investors, and influencers in the Boston startup community to uncover actionable advice and stories from their experiences. I'm your host, Nick Dupuis. This is the 41st episode of the podcast and is the third and final episode of the San Diego mini-series. In this episode, I have the pleasure of talking with Beck Bamberger, founder and CEO of BAM Communications, a PR firm for startups. Beck graduated UCLA in 2 years and was then the youngest MBA graduate from the University of Pittsburgh at age 21. She started BAM Communications while working as a news anchor in San Diego and won an Emmy in 2011. Shortly after, she also founded Byte, San Diego's top-rated and largest food tour company in the country, and sold it in 2016. In this episode, Beck talks about how founders can know if they are ready to have a PR firm, and how they can know when they're not ready, some common misconceptions about public relations, how to decide what PR firm to work with, and her ongoing project of expanding her own comfort zone by doing what makes her uncomfortable. If you like today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes so you can get all of the new episodes as soon as they're released right on your podcast app. And as always, you can find today's show notes at startupbostonpodcast.com, and you can reach me at nic@startupbostonpodcast.com. Enjoy today's episode. Beck, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me, and welcome to San Diego.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Beautiful, sunny.
70 degrees, man, every day.
All the time.
Pretty much.
To get us rolling here, can you give us a little background about yourself?
Yes, I'm actually a San Diego native. I know you do mostly Boston-focused startups. I went to UCLA as my undergrad in economics. I did my MBA at 19, finished that up early, so I had a very early start on that. I did some TV work, some TV shows. Then I started BAM, and today we represent all types of fast-growing, tech-oriented startups of all sorts, from consumer tech to enterprise level, which includes drones, robotics, AI, bots, SaaS, the whole shebang.
So you've done a lot of projects.
Yes.
Currently work on a lot of projects too. How do you decide which projects to work on?
I will say now, doing as many things as I have done, I'm much better, and I'm a big fan of no. No meaning people ask me all the time, oh, do you want to be on this board, or do you want to do this talk, or you want to do... The answer is usually no at this point, because you find over time, especially I think longer in your career or longer in your trajectory as a human, that time is very precious, and you need to be vicious about who gets that time. Mm-hmm. So I look at everything from, there's a 10-10-10 rule. So how do I feel about this? How will I feel about this 10 minutes from now? How will I feel about this 10 weeks from now? How will I feel about this 10 years from now? And that helps clarify, should you get involved with whatever that opportunity is? Because all opportunities vary in length and duration, of course, but if you can silo it into where does this fit in my trajectory and my time allotment, that'll help you a lot.
There's Derek Sivers also says it's either hell yeah or no. So
yes.
If he's not wicked stoked about it, then
it's a no.
Then it's a no.
It's really a no. Yeah. And if you're, and I think too, if you're on the fence, that's also usually a no.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's easy to commit to something, 10 weeks away, 10 months away, mm-hmm. But then once you get closer, mm-hmm. it might change.
Yes.
So I think some people might not be totally sure of what PR is and what it's for. So can you start us off by saying, what is PR and
sure.
who can it benefit?
Sure. Overall, public relations is encompassed in the sphere of marketing, typically, because it's about communicating to your publics, whatever your message story is. Your publics can be many audiences. It can be your internal workforce. It can be government entities. It can be your end consumer. It can be your buyer, and so on and so forth. So let's take, for example, Amazon. Who are their publics? Well, it's stockholders who own technically the company. It's maybe other board members. It's their internal workforce, their employees. It's the general consumer mindset of a potential customer for them. And it's probably some regulatory bodies, most definitely, when they're doing drone stuff and such. So they have a lot of publics to manage. So in the field of public relations, it is back to how you communicate the messages and the stories of that. Now, what we're focused on is really in the silo of media relations. So we're here to obtain earned organic media coverage for our clients. They want to be in, for example, Bloomberg or TechCrunch or CNBC or Home Beautiful or The Today Show or Ellen and various Los Angeles Times. I mean, various outlets that we do not pay to get a story or coverage in. Mm-hmm. There's paid media that you can certainly do, and that's typically advertising.
Okay.
So in the silo typically of media relations is how are you getting the story out to earned editorial media outlets? Encompassed in media relations is, of course, public relations. So there are people that work just on internal comms teams, and they are maybe in charge of, well, how do we communicate the changes and the activity going on in our company? Because we have 2,000 employees or 200 or whatever it may be. And then there's even investor relations comms. So investor relations is just strictly on the communication to the investors that own the company. And that's all Wall Street tied. So there's various forms of it mostly, but it is about how do you communicate the message to your publics, whatever those publics are defined as.
Mm-hmm. And why do you love PR? Why does that excite you?
I love storytelling. I love stories. I listen to podcasts. I read tons of books. I love stories being told to me. I love to listen to live stories. It's just storytelling. And I just love it. So public relations helps foster that one area of, okay, how do we tell the story?
Yep.
How does the story evolve, the narrative over time? And I'm just fascinated by that and just in love with it.
You could share the stories of all the different companies that you work for.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's and it's also, it's not easy for sure, because public relations remains one of the most stressful jobs in America on all those lists that you see. And a lot of times it's because in media relations, at least, the media outlets do not owe you anything. They don't owe you anything. So you're trying to convince them for free to do something for free about how wonderful your client is. And that story better be good. So the whole challenge of doing great media relations as a publicist is you better have a good story, or you better plate the story in such a way that it now sounds really good and it's compelling for that writer, reporter, journalist. So it's fun. It's a fun challenge, and just storytelling is one of my loves.
How do founders of startups know if their company is ready for a PR firm?
I did a specific article just on this for, I believe it's in Forbes or Fast Company, so I contribute to a number of outlets. And it's a flow chart that helps you ask and figure out that question. There's many things you need in advance to get a good, consistent story out. So one is fundamentally the messaging of your company. Do you know your target audience and how you speak to them? Do you know your core values and mission and vision statement? Do you know what your offer is? And do you know the typical Simon Sinek of what it is, how we do it, and why we do it? That's basically it. So that's one very fundamental building block. So for some companies that come to us, especially young startups, and they say, oh, we want to get this press release out, or we want to talk that we're out of beta or something of that sort. I said, I advise against that unless you are absolutely confident that narrative is not going to change in the foreseeable future, i.e. you're not going to change your mind in 3 weeks. 3 years, sure, things develop. But you need to be very crystal clear on that audience messaging, whom your publics are, and that it's not going to go back and forth, because what is a waste of time and a waste of money, frankly, is when you do a PR campaign, you pay an agency or you invest the time yourself with an internal team, whatever, and then, things change. Oh, we're going to go this whole different way. We're going to pivot. We're going to do, don't waste your time. Best you stay in a silo and you stay stealth as much as possible until you have all of those messaging elements completely buttoned up.
Mm-hmm. And until it's consistent.
Then it is about keeping it consistent.
Right.
So once you've defined what that messaging and targeting is, then it's about keeping it consistent in the media narrative.
Okay. And so BAM works mainly with startups, right?
Varies startups at the whole spectrum of their career, let's say, or their life cycle. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times it's post A round or about to announce A round, that we're kind of a mid-tier price point. So we're not a super scrappy, cheap agency. There's, freelancers you can find and such. So it's a client service business, which means it is expensive when you're paying for the best. Just like a law firm. You want to pay for the top lawyers. Yeah, they're going to be, $500 an hour, let's say. Mm-hmm. So typically around the A round, some clients that are going to the B round, some clients that are trying to IPO or get acquired. We've had many acquisitions happen over the time. They're somewhere on that life cycle. Or this is happening more and more. It's a big, even publicly traded company already, or a notable, long in the game, been around for years. We have one in New York particularly. And they've decided that they need to have something innovative happening. So they have a new branch or they have a new department that is dedicated to creating the next X, whatever that may be. And so a number of times we'll come on for projects like that where the parent company wants to spur a certain development and spin it out and see what happens. I mean, maybe it's going to fail miserably or maybe it's going to be great. They don't know yet, but they want to push and see if it can be a new channel for them.
Yeah. Why did you want to work with startups?
It's just fun. They're always changing. It's fast evolving. It's definitely not for everybody. Mm-hmm. I'm a person who loves the change and loves the challenge of it and is always iterating myself. All my friends are entrepreneurs typically. I'm just in that space, and entrepreneurs are typically optimistic about the future and what they're developing. Sometimes, of course, to such a hubris, ridiculous level of, your cat feeding app is not actually changing the world at all, and it only services 0.3% of the population, i.e. who's in San Francisco and New York. Mm-hmm. But overall and overarching typically is a gusto to entrepreneurs that is so fun. And when that culture is in that startup, which pretty much has to be, otherwise the startup's not going to go anywhere fast, mm-hmm. it radiates from that. So that's a fun energy to be around, and I just love that.
What are some of the common misconceptions that people have about public relations?
One that we do hear a lot, that is an industry issue for decades, is, well, I don't know the impact. I don't know if it works. Well, what did I get from that? Mm-hmm. Oh, well, it didn't increase my downloads by this much, or I didn't get this many sales this much, or I didn't move the product on. Blah, so on and so on and so forth. And of course, when you're working with objective engineer type STEM oriented people, they want to know input A exited me to output B. Yeah. Oh, I directly see it. And we have Google Analytics, of course, so we can track the digital coverage that we receive. But a click to a website is not a conversion, number one. And number two, public relations exists in the realm, and media relations specifically exists in the realm of branding and advertising overall. That is a deeply psychological evolution for a consumer to actually buy your product. Simple question I ask people, especially when I speak at startups and stuff, is why are you drinking a can of Coca-Cola right now? Do you actually say, oh, well, you know what? When I was 5, I saw it on a fridge when I was in the store. No, you don't know your first exposure, your only exposure. It's the collective exposure, typically of a brand, that eventually gets you to a sale. Sometimes it's one and it results in a sale, let's say. Mm-hmm. But often it's various inputs that make the consumer take action. So it is not a one-to-one input-output scenario. And that is a very large frustration of public relations, and for people not in the realm or the media relations realm to understand the impact of it. But as one last note here, if you want to really understand on a financial level, what is the impact of, let's say, bad PR and stuff, bad PR shuts down companies. It diminishes stock prices. Great example is this United situation going on right now. Their market cap went down like $1 billion. Now it rebounded, but now there's other stuff coming out that may also taint it for a while. Theranos, pretty much abolished company. Zenefits went down in flames, pretty much. So not having your arms around public relations and a grasp of it on media relations is a dangerous position, because there is actual economic impact from that. One thing I've told a couple of founders before when they're in a very competitive landscape is they go, oh, well, we don't need public relations. We don't want media relations. We don't want to spend on that. I said, okay, well, are you fine seeing an article with your 3 competitors noted in it and you're missing from it? The answer is typically no. So you need to be in that dialogue. You need to be in that those pieces of coverage because that has an importance. Of course, they can't clarify why they want to be it, but they know the answer is no. They don't want to miss out.
Yeah.
And that is a critical distinction.
Let's say that a company checks all the boxes and they're ready to hire a PR firm. How do they go about deciding which one to hire, which one's best for them?
I often tell startups it's kind of three main components. One, what are you getting? What is the actual promise of this agency? Now, we guarantee our results. So we have a very specific model that's unique in the industry. That's a pretty aggressive promise, obviously, being that bold. But what that means is we're very careful of whom we bring on board because we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot. So it is critical that you understand what are you getting and what is what's the skin in the game, basically, that this agency has to you. Other than, oh, we tried really hard and oh gosh, it just failed. That's not a very satisfying promise. But in comparison, you look at the legal industry, and if you're going to a law firm to say, okay, I'm being sued right now, obviously I want to win. Same thing in legal, like you might win, you might lose, and you still have the legal bill. So this is a problem in client service industries usually. But we have the different model, as I mentioned. So one is the skin in the game. Two is just the jive. Does your team work well with the PR team? Obviously you haven't worked yet together, but when you meet and greet them, when you see them on the conference call or you see them on the conference video or whatever, you meet them in person and see their offices, are you feeling confident that they will get what you're going for? If you have a product that is for, let's say, millennial women, this is the case in many of our clients, that's their target. Why would they work with a PR firm that's staffed with guys in their 50s and 60s in the Midwest, let's say, when you're targeting millennial-oriented urban women? That would be off, right? So jive is important. Do you get each other? Can you kind of see the flow of you guys working together? So that's number two. And then number three is, do you have enough of the resources yourself, time mostly, to dedicate to this agency? That's a real hard question for them to answer sometimes, because a public relations or media relations agency relationship is not, hey, here's your check. Okay, you're going to get these results. Bye. Talk to you in 90 days in our quarterly review. No, it's a lot of input. So there has to be someone on the team or team members, like a marketing head, a CMO typically, or one engaged co-founder who can really be accountable and attentive to what the PR firm needs. That's not a popular answer, but you really have to understand, do you have the time to be on a call every week, to give feedback immediately, to be on a TV station at the drop of the hat? We had a client fly in from Israel yesterday to LA. He had a segment on CNBC that night in LA. I don't care you're jet lagged, you're going to go on air. So that's a real hard but critical third component of picking the agency. Can you deal with the demands of it?
From your end, how do you figure out if someone that wants to hire you is a good fit for you? Is it the same thing, those three things?
Yes, we have various things we do to kind of suss them out. So one great situation is when, and this happens a lot, a VC firm refers their portfolio company to us.
Okay.
That's great because we know that they've already done all this due diligence on that founder and the company and everything, such that it is very unlikely that they're a hot mess, or that the founder's an asshole, frankly, or the company isn't ready for being in the marketplace, and so forth. That's always great. So that's a nice benefit. So we look at various factors like that. It's like, what is coming from the founder, and what are we dealing with attitude-wise or personality-wise? Where is the company in its life cycle of its brand? Do we have things to talk about? Do we have news that's coming out? Or is this going to be a real challenging one where the company sits back and says, yeah, we're just existing, so you make up the news? Well, that's a much harder campaign to get around. Not impossible, absolutely not, but more challenging. So those are some of the factors that we look at, and there's quite a few more, but those are some of the factors. And we say no a lot just because, nope, it's not going to work. Your demands are too high. Oh, I will say that's probably the number one thing, and this is for agency people overall. If you get the red flags early on that the expectations are ridiculous, that is a no-go.
What would be some examples
sign
of
up.
that?
One that I have found to be consistent over the years is if they're nitpicking let's say, the contract. Change this, change it. I'm not talking negotiating. I'm talking about nitpicking it to just destroying it. What about that? What about this? What about this? Trying to squeeze. Oh, that's bad. Trying to squeeze, but we want this. Oh, we want that. We don't want that. Oh, but we don't want to pay more. It's like, this is already coming off not as a partnership. Mm-hmm. This feels like a vendor relationship. And we're not into being a vendor. We're not.
Yeah.
We're here to be your partner in your business and get you to the next phase of whatever in your life cycle and beyond. And if it feels like it's getting squeezed from the start and we're just being trampled, no, we don't want that.
Because then you wouldn't enjoy it either.
It's going to be a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the team's not going to be happy about that. And it has all these spiral effects of that, because that's probably also the tone of the culture there, of the company, that they're going to be like that. Not necessarily, but that's a good indication that you're probably dealing with a culture that wants to squeeze everyone.
What are some of your favorite campaigns that you've worked on over the last few years?
One right now, I will say very timely because their party is happening tonight, is for a VR company called Upload. And we worked with them. This is now, I don't know, almost more than half of a year we've been working with them. And they are a platform that is basically the authority of all things AR, VR oriented. But when we've come on board, they've now expanded that to a huge space that's opening in LA that can be an academy. They're also opening a venture firm or a venture fund so that they can fund AR, VR. So their authority in the space is just mushrooming. And it's very fun to be involved when you're seeing it super scrappy, young, and then the growth that comes from that. And that now tonight they're opening a party. They're having a party that's being attended by 2,000 something people with a really slick state-of-the-art space in the center of LA. That's cool. Yeah. That's one little story.
That sounds exciting.
It is exciting. It's always evolving. That's the exciting part.
What are some of the biggest challenges that the companies face when launching a new campaign?
Sometimes, we've seen this a couple of times, it is consensus. And by consensus, I mean, what is the consensus on the messaging, the direction, the clarity? Some companies we work with have lots and lots of layers and lots of players. Mm-hmm. So there's maybe the marketing team we're dealing with, and then there's maybe now a COO involved, and now there's the two founders, and maybe they're bickering, and maybe, some other junior. So, people basically are the root of all problems, is the truth. It's the best of the world. It's the worst of the world, because that can get all mucked up. Someone has an opinion or an idea that's not being heard or received or whatever. So delays happen from a lack of consensus. So if you cannot get the consensus, then you're stopped. You're halted. You can't move forward with an announcement, for example. You can't agree to launch something or a press release, whatever it is. That derails a lot of progress with the PR campaign.
What's been the hardest part about growing BAM so far? When did you found it?
2008. And frankly, for years, I didn't know what to do with BAM. I was kind of just learning along, and we were doing, a lot of restaurant stuff. I mean, I didn't come from a big agency, so this was a on the job full-time internship, paid internship, but learning on the fly, big time, and not having a clear goal marker, goalpost, was probably what derailed BAM's growth for a while. Now it's very clear. Now we have very clear 2020 goals of what we want to do, and we have the advisors on board and some senior staff and everything. So now it's all moving in the right direction. But if you're not clear on the outcome desired, that muddles direction of any sort. That's kind of like that quote. I'm going to totally butcher it, but wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah.
Okay. And did you make it? Did you not? So I like to play the game. And by the game, I mean the game I define. That's one of the funnest things of having a startup or a company is you as the founder get to define what's the game and how are you going to win the game, whatever. And you get to decide. Does that mean you go public? Does that mean you sell to a big company? You get acquired? Whatever your game, or you have a company for 50 years. I don't, whatever that game is, make a fun game and know how to win it and then go after winning it. And that's just great.
How did you transfer from restaurants to startups?
Yeah, good question. Well, a lot of restaurants are startups, I will tell you that, but not the kind I like to be involved with. Slowly but surely, as I got more exposed to friends, contacts, the VC world, we were trickling in client by client this space. And as typical of any agency or client service business, like you have one that's in this area, and then you have one, you got two, and then three, and then, one refers the next one. And so then it just starts to grow. And at a very definitive point about 2.5 years ago, I decided, okay, we're going to go all tech. This is going to be it. This is it. This is our niche. We're going to do the whole thing, and we're going to say no to everything else. So we still have companies that, ping us and call us and everything. We go, yeah, we don't touch that. We don't do that. And you try to refer them off to somebody or find them a good fit. But that was a clear decision that I made that was very helpful to now our trajectory.
What does it mean to you to be successful? How do you define that?
I think it's about being free. And by that I mean free to pursue what you want, free to do what you want. Mm-hmm. That can mean I wake up whenever I want. I choose the people I hang out with, so forth. For other people, it means I can buy an island. I can sail around the world. I can do whatever. So that, I think, is the ultimate aim. Whatever, again, back to however you define that game. Whatever your game definition is of winning success that gets you that freedom to do it, hallelujah. That's it. So I think it's tied to that freedom. Yep.
I want to talk a little bit about the expanding your comfort zone and going out of your comfort zone. And so you've done all these different, projects, we'll call them.
Experiences, let's say.
Experiences, yes. So can you talk a little bit about why you wanted to do that and some of the things that you've done?
Mm-hmm. I just did a TEDx talk on this, and I've had a couple people ask me to talk more about this, which has been kind of a surprise in seeing how many people are into this, because I didn't think anyone would really care about this. But nothing great happens inside the comfort zone. No one is really accomplishing anything by sitting in their pajamas all day, watching Netflix and eating bonbons, ever. Now, that's not where I was, of course, but I'm very intrigued in how you accelerate. How do you accelerate that success of freedom? How do you accelerate to the next level? How do you, I don't want to say cheat or like life hack, that's a popular term right now, but what are the tools that get you to the next level? That's yes, I want to know those tools. So purely as an experiment, I thought, okay, well, I guess I got to practice. I'm going to practice being uncomfortable, because that's how you get good at anything. You practice. And practice is hard because it's deliberate. No one becomes a world champion in anything by hoping passively that they will become that. No, absolutely not. So I thought it's just like running a marathon. You want to run a marathon, you better start running laps. So you want to be comfortable with anything uncomfortable, you better start running the laps of what's uncomfortable. So that included for me being a nude model, living homeless, building a shelter of sticks and living in that, like in a wilderness thing, going to a silent 4-day meditation retreat, training with the dominatrix, doing panhandling, doing day laborer. A whole litany of things that had all various degrees of uncomfortableness. There's not one that's singled out as the most uncomfortable, because people like to ask, like, what's the most uncomfortable? It's just various shades of uncomfortable, and it's very personal what's uncomfortable. So to do this practice, you have to define what is uncomfortable for you. And that's what I use with like a JOMO. I call it the JOMO FOMO test. So if you have a lot of joy in missing out on something, that's probably an uncomfortable experience for you, because you don't want to do it. You're like, I'm good. That's probably uncomfortable for you. Versus fear of missing out. Those are people who are going, oh my gosh, I totally want to do that. Oh my gosh, that'd be so great. You really want to do something, probably because you really want to do that and you're comfortable with whatever that is, whether that's going out for tacos or going to Coachella or whatever. For some people, they have FOMO about Burning Man. They don't want to miss Burning Man. They love Burning Man, whatever. Some people are like JOMO to Burning Man. They don't want to go to that thing. That is like hell for them. And that's probably those people who are like, oh, I don't want to go, like, I'm good. Those are probably people who would find that as an uncomfortable experience. So that's the first step in doing this practice, is you have to identify what is the real uncomfortable experiences for you that you can go out and pursue in order to get this practice in. And with practice, you get confident. And once you have confidence, you're much more likely to pursue other things that were once considered uncomfortable.
How do you choose the ones that you've done?
People suggest them to me. I would think about them. I mean, yesterday, this is one that's on my list now. I was parked in front of this restaurant and I was on a call and I'm looking outside the window and I see 2 big dumpsters. And I thought, oh, dumpster diving. That's horrible. Like, I don't want to do that. And then I'm like, oh, that's a great uncomfortable experience because I don't want to pick out trash and try to find something I can eat. But there's people who have to do that every day.
Yeah.
That's an uncomfortable experience.
What else is on your list?
Helping birth a baby. That's on my list. But that's hard because the timing and everything involved in that is extensive. So, but that's on my list. If you have any takers, let me know. But just, I think it's miraculous and also disgusting at the same time and inglorious and something I never want to do myself. So I think that would be an incredible and uncomfortable experience. That's one.
What does the future of BAM look like?
BAM is to be owned by a large, probably public or well-established international PR agency that would take us under their global umbrella.
I want to move now into our rapid fire questions.
Sure. Let's do it.
So the first one is, what's a startup in San Diego that you're most excited about?
I'm going to give a plug for my friend Luke over at CourseKey. And CourseKey is a company that's interested in giving technology platforms to students in higher ed, which means when you go into a lecture hall, normally you're scribbling notes, you're looking at a blackboard or a whiteboard or whatever the heck is in your lecture hall, and that's just not efficient. So what they have is kind of a textbook model, but for technology in that the professor doesn't have to pay anything, but the students can pay, $50 for the course, and now all the material that's being shared, the lecture and such, can be accessible via their laptop, their desktop, their phone, their tablet, whatever digital platform you have to get all the information. So now you don't have to scribble all those stupid notes or take photos of the blackboard. No, it's all in whatever device you choose. That's a fun one. They're having some rapid growth.
I understand you do a lot of traveling. You've done a lot of traveling.
Yeah.
So what's your best travel story?
One of my favorites is I run everywhere. I go, well, okay, now I got 2 running stories. I'll give you this one, which just shows horrible, privileged white girl not having a clue. This is basically the situation. So one time I'm in Africa, I'm in Kenya, and I'm going on one of the safaris. I'm staying at this lovely resort in the middle of nowhere, of course, in the middle of the Serengeti or wherever region. Anyway, there's animals everywhere. And the resort is fenced off. Because there are no gates for the animals, of course, it's just the wilderness. So the resort is encapsulated in an electrified, fenced off place. And we got there, and I just can't believe how I was obviously not thinking. So we land it with a little jumper plane, and you can see all the animals everywhere. There's just elephants, there's giraffes, you can see vultures, you can see antelope, you see a cheetah. It's just a plenty. It is like the Lion King, for real. There is no really hard time to find the animals. They're all there. And we're driving to the resort. We get there. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go for a run because it's been a long day of travel and everything. I'm going to go for a run. So I get on my running shoes and I go to the gate of the resort where they have the little security booth or whatever. And there's a guy in there and he's laughing at me. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go for a run. He's like, what are you talking about? And he has his accent or whatever, but he's laughing, and he's laughing with his friend. He's like, there's animals out there. What are you going to run on the dirt path? There's a cheetah out there. There's lions out there. No, you can't, you could get eaten, literally eaten, chased after it. And I'm like, oh my God, how stupid of me, because I just had never been somewhere where being outside running was an actual threat to my existence. From an animalistic level. I am someone's prey. And they said, oh, you're deaf. No. So I had to run inside the resort. That's a little story.
That's interesting.
It's embarrassing, but yeah.
Where does your love of helicopters come from? You fly helicopters.
Yes. I'm taking lessons to fly Robinson 22s right now. And I've been before I started taking lessons, I'd been in a number of them. Just long, rides and fun excursions. And it's so fun. It's a viewpoint that's nothing like flying. It's absolutely not like flying at all. And also a few years ago, when I was doing some TV work, I did an interview with the then CEO of Robinson Helicopters. It's actually in Orange County, their whole facility, their headquarters. And they put together the helicopters there on the premise. So you stand in the manufacturing room. I mean, it's a giant, giant room. And as long as your eye can see, it's just glimmering white, and it's a factory floor. And you can see the production and the excruciating detail of manufacturing this. I imagine this is like what Tesla's manufacturing floor looks like too, where you go and it's gleaming white, like supposedly. Yep. Same thing in this place. And it was just so neat to see these machines come together with human touch points too, because it's a super high touch crafted machine. I think that's what maybe spurred the interest in it. Plus just the experiences I had in helicopter flying. I was like, that's just so rad. I want to do that. Yeah.
When will you get your license?
I'm on a real slow pace of that right now. I kind of fit it in when I can. So there's people. Yeah, it's a lot of hours. It's much more difficult than getting your pilot's license for a regular plane, by the way. So I don't know. I mean, sometime this year, next year, I'm really on no pace of that. I just enjoy what I learn every time. Yep. There's also, 960 ways you can kill yourself at any second. So there's a lot of the training about how not to do that.
Safety.
Yes. So we will see, but eventually that's the goal.
Okay. What's something about you that most people don't know?
I don't get worked up about stuff. I can get excited about stuff, but that's very different from being like worked up, like, upset or something. And I just, no. Like really deep down, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And that mindset gives you a huge ramp of freedom, again, to just be like, then this is going to be just funny or interesting or uncomfortable or whatever. And it's fine.
Yep.
It's totally fine.
What advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Pick a goal mark. And by that, I mean in BAM's growth trajectory, I would have picked the goal mark much faster. Now they say, of course, millennials, they spend a whole decade, the 20s, like figuring out what they want to do or whatever. I've always been very goal oriented. So it was like, okay, I'm going to finish UCLA at 19. I'm going to go get my MBA. I'm going to be 21. Like I'm goal oriented, but not having such a significant goal defined there probably kept us from the growth that we could have had. If instead I had made it much more clear of what ultimately the game is, then we would have been much further along, I think, at this point. So I would have told myself, like, figure out the goal, and then just go for it. And when you get to it, then you can go, okay, now what? But at least something that was very specific could have been much more helpful.
Outside of work, what do you look forward to the most?
I want to go with the travel aspect. That's probably a cliche aspect, but I will clarify that with, I just came back from a trip from Myanmar and Laos, and for me, the best and most refreshing travel is the kind that is gritty and off the grid and uncommon. So I don't like to go to, let's say, France. France is great. Wonderful. I don't want to go to a lot of European, polished up, perfect places. I want to go to places where no one looks like me. There's no brands of any sort that are ever in your face, especially from America, and that have people living the way they do. That's really my favorite. Wilderness is wonderful, and I was in New Zealand last year. Wonderful. It's beautiful. There's hardly anyone in New Zealand. The population's about 4 million. But it wasn't a satisfying trip because I didn't get a lot of exposure to a different kind of society or culture and how they live. I'm really interested in the stories of people and the stories overall. And part of that is how you live every day. I love that stuff. That's really my interest.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was in Costa Rica and it was very similar. It's very different than how we live here. You see the like little shanties on the side of the road with the dirt floors, and it's pretty humbling.
And beyond that, though, to most of the world, the life that most Americans live seems ridiculous. with huge houses out in the middle of nowhere, let's say for a lot of rural areas of America, where you live in 4,000 square feet with no one else living with you, no family members. You go to a store and you get all these things that are packaged up. I mean, that's weird to most of the world. That is not normal. What's much more normal is you have a shack you built yourself or a compound of some sort, and you have family living with you, and you're around people all the time, and you all help out, and you all have dinner every day together. And that's how life is. We live in a very different way than most of the world.
What are your favorite tools that help make your life and work easier?
An obvious one is Gmail. I really like Google's suite of all their stuff that fits together and makes life seamless. They've done a very good job on that. Google Hangouts is still a little rough, I will give you that. But the email integration and the calendar integration and then all the other things that come with that are just lovely. Another one that's rather obvious is Postmates, because frankly, it's great to have stuff dropped off to you when you need it. A great example of that is about 2 weeks ago, I was super sick with food poisoning. On the ground, barely surviving. And I Postmated some stuff. I don't know if that's a verb yet, but man, someone ran to 7-Eleven for me and got me all this stuff because no one was around. I was out of town. And so I'm in a place where no one knows where I don't know anybody. I can't call a friend. So that's very helpful. And then as one last tool, I will say is, and there's many of them that exist, but Scanner Pro. So it's just an app. So you can just scan anything on the go. That is so helpful. Yep. It's so helpful. Yeah. Who has a printer anymore? Someone said yesterday, "Oh, can you fax this thing over?" I said, "What is it? 1991? Like, no fax, dude. No, just get your scanning app."
What are your favorite blogs or books?
One that I just finished reading that I really enjoyed, especially if you're into poli-sci, is The Dictator's Handbook. Ooh, and that is a great overview. I actually forgot the author, but great overview of why dictatorships and democracies work and function and exist, and how we are dealing with so many different forms of government in current society. It's a great overview. Another book that is a favorite, kind of making the rounds in the startup circle, is The Art of Not Giving an F by Mark Manson.
Yeah, that's
just a good overview. It's a little bro-y and a little tongue-in-cheek, but the basis of it is really true to my foundational belief of nothing really matters and it should not bother you, and don't invest the time and energy in being upset. It's just not even it's not even worth it.
Yeah, it goes back to what you said about not getting worked up.
It's not worth it. No.
Just a few final questions to close out. So where can people find out more about BAM Communications?
Our website is the best. We're going through a brand refresh right now, but you can still look at the website, bamcommunications.biz, B-I-Z, all spelled out. And then my personal website is just beckbamberger.com, all spelled out.
And where can people connect with you online?
That's the best place for my personal website, because I have my email address, and you can find me on Facebook. I'm not cool enough to be on Snapchat, sorry. So, I still use Facebook. I'm one of those older people. Yeah.
Do you have any
LinkedIn,
Do you have any parting thoughts, advice, or suggestions for the audience?
I mentioned this today to one of our general managers who's working on a project, because we were going back and forth on something, and I said, "Listen, this comes from Facebook and kind of the Mark Zuckerberg genre, but done is better than perfect. Do not agonize for hours over some detail that is not important right now." I'm not talking about the detail of, let's say, the helicopter being built and flying off the ground. Right. But the detail of what is the color of this new logo that is in our beta use that is not going to see the light of day otherwise is not an important detail. So get it done, decide, and move on. It's better than agonizing over perfection. And the other thing, of course, with perfection is that is so subjective. You never win at perfection. You never win. So you just have to let that go.
Because someone else will always have something that they want to change.
They want to change something. They have a different opinion. Now this is the new rules of how perfect looks, and anything else is just, and this goes back to just, everything about how you look, your body or whatever, and consciousness. It's like there's no perfect. So you just let go. There's no perfect ever. Forget it. Just get it done. That's my advice.
I like it. Beck, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you for being here, and welcome to San Diego.
Thank you. If you liked today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. You'll get all my new episodes as soon as they're released right on your podcast app. And if you really liked today's episode, it would mean a lot to me if you could write a review of the podcast as well. Just go to startupbostonpodcast.com/iTunes. And remember, you can find all show notes with links at startupbostonpodcast.com. Until next time, if you have any feedback, ideas for guests, or just want to say hi, you can reach me at nic@startupbostonpodcast.com. Or reach out on Twitter at StartupBossCast. That's Startup BOS Cast. Cheers.